In 2010, millions of Americans were introduced to a simple idea.
Well, this is how
A
rainy the
powerful
sky
boss
is.
walks into his own company wearing a disguise so no one would recognize him, just to see how it really works from the bottom up. What workers experience every day, what they struggle with, what they rarely say out loud. Tonight, you'll witness a version of that story, but with a twist most people never saw coming. A quiet man in a broom-worn jacket, pushed aside like he was invisible, until one moment changed everything. Before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. What happened next would expose arrogance, reveal truth, and force a reckoning no one in that room saw coming. In 2009, a television experiment called Undercover Boss revealed something uncomfortable about corporate America. When leaders removed the suit and stepped onto the shop floor, they discovered fear, silence, and truths no executive report ever captured. This story echoes that reality, but it begins with humiliation instead of curiosity. A billion-dollar supermarket empire stood tall over the Midwest, built over 40 years on hard work and community trust. Yet inside its glass headquarters, employees lowered their voices when footsteps approached. Harrison & Cole Supermarkets was led by Richard Cole, a results-driven CEO who believed pressure created performance, and beside him stood his daughter Vanessa, polished, ambitious, and already treated like the future of the company. Layoff rumors moved through departments like cold air through open doors. Workers spoke quietly about a majority shareholder no one had seen in years, a man whose signature still carried ultimate authority. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. What the executives didn't realize was that their unseen owner was closer than they thought, listening. 3 weeks earlier, while Richard Cole was presenting growth projections and Vanessa Cole was preparing another performance review, the man whose signature still controlled 51% of Harrison & Cole made a decision that would change everything. Thomas Harrison, co-founder, largest shareholder, and the quiet partner rarely seen in public, folded away his tailored suit and stepped into a faded work jacket instead. He traded polished shoes for steel-toed boots, parked his town car, and climbed behind the wheel of a rented delivery van. He signed in through a side entrance as temporary contract labor, just another name on a clipboard. No executive alert, no security briefing. Contractors moved through checkpoints with little attention. Badges were scanned, not faces studied. Thomas Harrison understood something simple. Executives guard the boardroom, but they rarely guard the basement. And if he wanted the truth about the culture Richard Cole and Vanessa Cole had created, he would have to stand where power believed no one important was watching. From the loading dock to the executive floor, Thomas Harrison watched without announcing himself. He saw a young assistant step into a supply closet to wipe her eyes after being torn apart in a meeting. He stood outside a conference room as regional managers were pressed to adjust numbers to protect investor confidence. In the aisles of one flagship store, he heard a supervisor mock an older employee for moving too slowly, reminding him that retirement papers were easier to process than complaints. Then he witnessed Vanessa Cole address her team in an open office, her voice sharp enough to silence the room. "If you can't handle pressure, retire," she said, and no one answered. Later, in a closed-door session, Richard Cole leaned back and stated plainly that fear builds discipline. Mopping quietly in the corner, Thomas Harrison absorbed every word. The company he built on loyalty and long hours had hardened into something colder, where respect was rationed and intimidation passed for leadership. By the 9th week of the quarter, Harrison & Cole hosted its annual charity gala in the penthouse suite above headquarters, a black-tie evening designed to impress investors and reassure the market. Crystal glasses clinked beneath soft lighting while executives spoke confidently about expansion and record margins. Thomas Harrison stood near the back of the room in a janitor's uniform, wiping down a service table long after the catering staff had finished, invisible in plain sight. Vanessa Cole, a few drinks into the night and surrounded by senior managers, noticed him and made a remark about how some people age out of usefulness but never leave the building. A few guests chuckled. Then, holding a glass of red wine, she stepped closer and tilted it slowly over his head, staining his jacket as laughter rippled through part of the room. "Oops, guess you'll be working overtime," she said. Thomas Harrison removed his glasses carefully and looked toward Richard Cole, who met his gaze and answered with a faint, approving smirk. For a moment, the room waited for anger, for humiliation to turn into protest, but Thomas Harrison did neither. Red wine dripped from his jacket as he lifted his wrist and checked his watch with the same composure he once carried into shareholder meetings decades earlier. Without raising his voice or defending himself, he set the cleaning cloth down and walked steadily toward the private elevator reserved for senior leadership. A security guard near the entrance looked at him twice, hesitation flickering across his face as recognition slowly replaced routine indifference. Thomas Harrison stopped just long enough to meet the guard's eyes and spoke in a tone that carried far more authority than volume. "Call the board. Now." The guard straightened instinctively. Around the room, whispers spread between executives and investors unsure of what they had just witnessed. Vanessa Cole exhaled impatiently and rolled her eyes, still convinced the evening belonged to her and that the quiet janitor walking away was nothing more than staff. Within minutes, the private elevator opened again and members of the board hurried into the penthouse suite, confusion written across their faces. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as one of the older directors stepped forward, staring at the wine-soaked uniform, then at the man wearing it. His voice broke the silence. "Mr. Harrison?" The room went still. Richard Cole felt the color drain from his face as understanding settled over him. The quiet janitor was Thomas Harrison, founder of Harrison & Cole and the 51% majority shareholder whose authority outweighed every title in the building. The janitor wasn't a janitor. He was the man who signed every paycheck in the company. Vanessa Cole instinctively stepped backward, her earlier confidence dissolving under the weight of realization. Thomas Harrison removed his stained jacket, folded it over his arm, and spoke evenly, without anger. "I built this company with respect. You built it with fear." The celebration dissolved into an emergency session as the board of Harrison & Cole convened on the spot, their earlier applause replaced with urgent whispers about liability, governance, and the damage already done. Thomas Harrison took his place at the head of the table without raising his voice, while Richard Cole attempted to speak but found no room left to command. A formal motion was introduced, and within minutes an emergency vote was called to suspend Richard Cole and Vanessa Cole pending a full internal investigation. Security, now fully aware of who stood before them, approached respectfully and escorted both of them from the penthouse as stunned investors calculated what the headlines might do to the company's stock at opening bell. Employees who had watched in silence for years stood along the corridor, some shaken, some quietly emotional. Thomas Harrison addressed the board with measured clarity. "Leadership is not inherited. It is demonstrated. What unfolded that night was not revenge, but accountability delivered without spectacle."
Weeks later, the hallways of Harrison & Cole felt different. Richard Cole had formally resigned, and Vanessa Cole had been removed from her position, replaced by managers chosen for integrity rather than title or legacy. New compliance policies were implemented, designed to ensure transparency, fairness, and respect for every employee regardless of rank. At the next employee town hall, Thomas Harrison stood at the front of the room, no longer in a janitor uniform but in the quiet authority of the founder who had walked among them unnoticed. His voice carried across the room, calm but firm. "If you fear your leaders, they have already failed." The room erupted in genuine applause, not the polite clapping of obligation but the sound of people who felt seen and heard for the first time in years. From that day on, Harrison & Cole's culture shifted from fear to accountability, a transformation built quietly yet powerfully under the watchful eyes of the man who had always owned it all.
In business, Thomas Harrison reflected, character compounds faster than interest, and disrespect carries a higher cost than any loss statement. Every decision, every word, every glance in the halls of Harrison & Cole had consequences far beyond the quarterly reports or stock price. The humiliation Vanessa Cole thought she could impose had revealed the truth about leadership, loyalty, and legacy. He had shown that power without respect corrodes, while patience, observation, and quiet authority command it. As the employees adjusted to their new reality, one lesson remained clear. Be careful who you look down on. Some men built the floor you're standing on. Harrison and Cole would never forget that night, and neither would the executives who had once thought fear was the same as control. The story ends here, but the message lingers. Fade to black.